Hello, everybody. Hello, Laura. How
Hello,
are you?
friend. I'm good, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We're here for another episode of Oh for Dying Out Loud. And we are having conversations about death, dying, and everything in between, which is life, and how we can use all this information to live in a more sacred way.
Mhm.
And welcome to everybody who's listening.
Love
So,
it.
great to have you.
Hello.
So today, Laura, is Indigenous Peoples Day. Did you know that?
I did know that. It struck me by surprise, of course.
Yeah.
And then yes. Hmm.
It's interesting because I think for a lot of people it's still a surprise because even though it's, the renamed federal holiday and but I think that still, we've been ingrained with it being Columbus Day that we forget that not only I know. And I just, a side note, just saw an article where they discovered through DNA testing that Columbus was actually a Spanish Jew. So that's a whole
Interesting.
conversation. So, but it's just the more you explore history, the more you realize things aren't always as they seem. So, but the bottom line is that, uh, we can glean some wisdom from some of our history. And I bring up Indigenous Peoples Day because I think that's appropriate. And it turns out that November is American Indian month.
Mhm.
So the entire month is dedicated to our native peoples of the Americas. And so I was today at work, I was doing I did a meditation and I was doing the honoring the four directions. And we do this in our sacred circle. And this is based on well, it's based on a lot of different traditions. I mean, the Wheel of the Year is Celtic, but the Native Americans have their medicine wheel, and this is how they honored nature and the four directions, north, east, south, and west. And there's different associations with those
Yes.
particular directions. And so, um, so I wanted to read that, but also just kind of explore this whole idea of the medicine wheel as a template for how we can look at our lives a little differently, right? Like
Absolutely. Yes.
we think it's linear, we just go, we're kids, we're teenagers, we're adults, and then we're old people, right? And there's it's just those are the stages of life. But there's a book that I want to reference to talk a little bit about that because I've been thinking about it a lot because I am entered into the second half of my life, second act.
Thank you.
Yes. So, excuse me. So let's talk about the four directions. Excuse me. Talk amongst yourselves.
Oh,
So this is just one version of the honoring the four directions sort of blessing. And it starts like this. And usually you stand and you face each direction. So those of you who are listening, if you would like to take a couple of deep breaths and actually stand and face each different direction to really feel the power of this blessing, I encourage you to do that. So we're going to start facing south. To the winds of the south, great serpent, mother of life-giving waters, wrap your coils of light around me. Remind me of how to let go and shed old ways of being. Teach me to walk the way of beauty. To the winds of the west, Mother Jaguar, support me as I see my own fears. Teach me how to transform my fears into love. Remind me of how to live with impeccability. May I have no enemies in this lifetime or the next. To the winds of the north, royal hummingbird, ancient ones, teach me about your endurance and your great joy. Come to me in the dream time. With honor, I greet you. To the winds of the east, eagle or condor, great visionary. Remind me to lead from my pure heart. Teach me to soar to new places, to fly wing to wing with spirit. Mother Earth, Pachamama, I pray for your healing. Let me soften into your wisdom. May I take great care of you so that my children and my children's children may witness the beauty and abundance you offer me today. Father, Sun, Grandmother Moon, star nations, Great Spirit, you who are known by 1,000 names, and you who are the unnameable one, thank you for bringing me here at this time. And in closing this blessing, we thank the serpent, jaguar, hummingbird, and eagle for their wisdom. We release their energies back to their 4 directions, and we return to our physical space. You know what I love about that so much is that it really speaks to this idea that the wisdom that we get for our spiritual lives and for our daily lives of living comes from the natural world. Not a book,
Yeah, not a
not
book.
I mean, not that you can't write it down and read it in a book, that's, but it's like lift your eyes up and notice what's going on around you,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
see, have so much wisdom to teach us.
I think it's such a lovely tradition of honoring the world around you and the natural world, and not the concrete that we put in, not the houses.
Right,
Not that you can't honor those things or be
right,
grateful and thankful, but the birds and the air and the trees and the grass and the soil and the water. It's so beautiful. Oh, to have that kind of grounding.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And it reminds us that, that's where we came from. I mean, we came from this very elemental, primal place, I mean, the natural world is made up of fire, air, water, earth, and we all kind of embody that. And the
Right.
more that we really take that to heart. I mean, the Celtic pagan wheel of the year is similar to that in that it follows the different seasons,
Yes.
which I really love. And there's so much wisdom there. It's like, for example, fall is happening here in Iowa, my favorite time of year. And it's so interesting to me because when you look at this other wheel that I'm going to show you in a minute, but the wheel of the year in the pagan tradition also is that the fall has the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer, and most people hate that, right? They're like, oh, it's going to get cold and all the days are getting shorter, but it's a deep invitation from nature to slow down, number one. And we all know I've had some problems slowing down. Oh, I know. You don't
I
need.
do.
See, I said that before you did.
Mhm.
But it invites us to slow down and be more reflective. And if you think about it from the natural world, you know, Samhain or Halloween was the last of the harvest traditions or
Right.
harvest celebrations. And so this is the time where we're gathering up the last of our harvest and we're letting the field lie fallow,
Mhm.
be gathered everything we can, and we're hunkering down for and preparing for winter. So in a way, it's like the fields are going to a death.
Yes.
And I think that and fall moving into winter is like moving into the death of the season. And I
Right.
think that's one of the reasons why we sometimes have a real challenge with embracing the season is because we don't want to look at that. We want things to be growing all the time, right?
Right.
And um but I like it. I've learned to love it because it's not just that the nature is inviting me to slow down, it's that I get permission. Like I think, oh, you know what? It's dark at 7:30. I don't feel like going out, so I'm not gonna, you know,
Exactly.
I don't want to do anything.
Yep.
So it's just that seasonal permission, that invitation from, you know, the seasons and nature, that there's a time for work and play and there's a time for rest and renewal.
Yeah, it's I love the idea of the gathering. It's like all the little squirrels and the little birds are fattening up
Yeah.
and getting ready to like hunker down for the cold months. This is clearly this is my favorite time of year.
Mhm.
And I love the idea that we get to do things like, you know, this is when I get out all I've already used my Instapot to make dried beans twice. Like it's been cool here for a hot minute. And I'm
Yeah.
already here. Like I'm like, yay! It's like it's glorious. It's
I
glorious.
know. I woke up this morning, I think it was 45 degrees, and I celebrated. And most people are like, you're crazy. But
Yes.
I love it because again, it just has that feeling about it. And I do think that when we do these kinds of practices where we stop and we really notice what's happening in the natural world, like if all of these other animals are gathering up their goods and they're going to harvest, or I mean, they're going to hunker down and hibernate. Some of them will just kind of, you know, they'll slow down and, you know, obviously some of them are still out there hunting and everything, but there's a slowness to it,
Hmm.
you know, and it's like, well, if that's what nature does every single year at this time, why
Yep.
would we, as an integral part of nature, do anything different? It's
Right. Why
like
would we?
we get out of balance with our health and well-being when we go against that natural cycle, you know?
Yep.
So, you know, the other thing that it has occurred to me too, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this, is that I'm coming up on lots of anniversaries of passings.
Mm, yes, you are.
October, November, December.
Mhm.
And so grief is very present. And to me, that's also kind of a wintering, if you will,
Yeah.
you know, that it's we don't I'm doing a talk at Unity Church on Sunday, and it's called Oh for Dying Out Loud, and it's about what grief has taught me. And it really, grief is another way of inviting us to slow down and check in with our feelings and to feel them.
Hmm.
That is probably the greatest gift that grief has taught me, is that if we kept plowing through the seasons and we don't give ourselves time to grab a warm blanket and a hot cup of tea and just sit on the couch and cry, journal, whatever, and just sit with what we're feeling, that we don't get to alchemize it into any kind of wisdom,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and continually stuffing things down inside of ourselves and not allowing the feelings to happen. Sometimes they're uh it's not it doesn't feel like the appropriate time or whatever, but they will start bubbling up and they will come out. Like they'll come
Oh
out in their own way and they will force their way if you don't deal with them. But you're right.
yeah. Mhm.
It's like this beautiful permission to just allow ourselves to just really exist and just let things. I mean, we talk about this all the time in the world of a death doula. A lot of it is about the grief and
Mhm.
acceptance and a lot of it is just about pausing, and there's no rush to get through, you know.
Right.
There's no rush
Well,
to
and
get through.
there's no rush. Absolutely. That's a big thing, is there's no rush. But also what occurred to me too is, you know, you've heard the saying, well, you know, grief, you just gotta get over it. Okay, well, no, we don't say that. And then the next phrase was, well, no, you just go through it. Maybe, but that still didn't ring true for me. And what I discovered was is that it's not either of those. It is learning to integrate it as a part of my life.
Mhm.
Because guess what? grief is cyclical, just like nature,
Right,
just like seasons. You know, every year the, you know, trees sort, you know, sort of die, the crops die, and we have a rebirth. And in every grieving that we have, there is a kind of rebirth if we let it happen,
yeah,
and if integrate it and say it's not something I got to get over and then just move on. It's something that I integrate and say this is a major feeling, it's a major emotion that is part of all the human spectrum of emotions, and they're going to occur. They're going
right.
to occur at any given time. And I don't need to just get over it or through it. I just need to be with it.
I just need to be with it. It just
Mhm.
walks with you. It's
It
just,
walks with you.
yeah,
Yes.
it just walks
Yes.
with you. Hmm.
And you can't hear its lessons unless you pause
Yeah,
and learn to be with it,
yes. And
and
accept it.
right.
Accept that it's there with you.
Accept that it's there with you. Yeah, absolutely. And at the time it may feel unacceptable, right? Like, but it's not,
Yes.
I mean, all emotions are welcome, all emotions are acceptable. And I wanted to share, so here's this book I'm reading. It's called let me see if I can make this a little larger so you can kind of see it. So this is from the book, The Great Conversation, Nature and the Care of the Soul. And
Ooh.
what I love about this is it kind of takes this idea of the medicine wheel and sort of says, okay, this is a template for our lives. Right. And, pagan tradition is kind of like this, in that, for example, the East represents spring, and this is associated with the element of air. And
Right.
so, it represents childhood, early childhood. This is where you watch kids. They're just like birds. They just want to soar. They want to explore everything.
Mhm.
They just, they're just everywhere. They just want to leap and play and be joyful. And so it's about taking flight. And so the East kind of represents that early childhood, the spring of our life. And then we move and this is in the first half of our life, then we move into the passionate adolescent. I love that they put it as passionate for those of you who have teenagers, and wow, no surprise, they're associated with the element of fire, right? And so they're warriors. They're trying to go out and discover who they are and fight for what is meaningful to them and their identity, and they're trying to transform themselves into what they believe is going to be the next iteration, their adult selves, right?
Right.
So it's passing through the flames. I love that. So this is the fire, and it's associated with the south of this medicine wheel. And then we move into the adult, right? And this is associated with the west, where the sun sets, right? And the intuitive adult. And this is where we're learning how to flow with all of it, right?
Yes.
So this is very much associated with water energy and rivers, and sometimes we find ourselves in canyons, and this is associated with the fall season,
Mhm.
right? So this is the adult time of our lives, when we're raising our kids, and then we are, moving into empty nesting, right? And so that's the fall season. It makes total sense that this is the fall season. Kids are moving off, they're starting their own lives. And then we move into the final stage, so to speak, which is the wise elder. And this is associated with the earth, and this is our second half of life, and it's associated with winter, right? And so we're in this winter and we're slowing down, things are drying up a little bit, but there's a deep, deep wisdom in that slowing down and that quiet.
Mhm.
What's beautiful about this, you can see these arrows, right? So even when we get to this winter, of our lives where we're the wise elder, because this is a circle, it's still indicating that the circle, may the circle be unbroken, right? There's
Bye, bye, low.
right,
Right?
right. It's continual because the wise elder, the seeds of our wisdom are going to be passed down
Yes.
to provide growth and wisdom for those children who are coming behind us. And
Yeah.
I was reflecting on this in a meditation group, online circle group that I'm doing. And it occurred to me, I don't have children of my own. And so there's times where, I had been thinking about, well, what do I have to give and offer? If I don't have children to directly impart my wisdom upon. And it occurred to me, this phrase just intuitively came to me. It said, the seeds of my wisdom will be planted and will provide growth for the next generation, even if they don't remember my name.
Sure.
Right? Like, just
Beautiful.
because somebody doesn't remember me, just because somebody doesn't show up to my funeral, doesn't mean that I didn't touch this environment, this forest, this nature,
Right.
that I still had something of value to give. And so of course, I'm in fall, moving into winter in my seasons. And so I think this is a really great way for me. It really resonated because I'm like, oh, of course I meant to slow down. Of course I meant to think about how to be more intuitive and go with the flow, and then thinking about, well, how can I share my wisdom, as I'm continuing to um, you know, pass on, from winter into spring, you
Yeah.
know?
Well,
So,
one of the beautiful things I love about this whole idea of the wheel,
mhm,
whether it's the medicine wheel, or if it's a more like a more pagan or Celtic wheel, it's kind of all the same. And it's this beautiful cycle of our journey in life. Um, and that it's like as the fall becomes here and we get closer to winter coming, um, this is the time when traditionally people would have started canning they would have canned during the late summer, and the winter crops are coming in, the sweet potatoes, the
right,
squashes, the things, and putting those away for those things that will sustain us
mhm,
through the winter time. And I think
right,
that in our lives,
mhm,
the parallel I draw is not only do we do that in a way, but also as we get older, I think we start to recognize the things that we store,
mhm,
whether it's a retirement or it's but it's not just monetary, it's also wisdom. It's you and I talked last time about how we prepare ourselves for as we age and our
mhm,
body doesn't do the things. I learned I have a bone spur, which
right,
ligament. But it's one of those crazy things where my body doesn't do all the same things. So the wisdom that I'm learning in preparation for my next when I'm entering the next or the last great winter, whenever that is, um,
mhm,
I'm gathering all the wisdom and things of how I can still take care of myself
mhm,
and in what ways I can take
right,
care of myself. So
right,
whether it's that I can't go running the way I want to, or maybe I can't go do something in the same way that I did even 2 years ago,
right,
because my body is like, you know what, that's not for you. That's not for you.
right,
And so it's a really hard lesson. I've watched it um as my parents age. I watch myself as I age, and it becomes frustrating. It's like, what do you mean I can't go do
Mhm.
this thing that I've always been able to do, but now when I do it, like when we fight against it, and we either get broken, uh,
Right,
or we learn that lesson, and we find a different way. And that's a really beautiful thing when you look at the wheel, um,
right.
to understand that we're just at a different season of our life. Um,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
and
and
each
that's
season is
normal.
beautiful. Yes, it's so normal. Hmm.
And I get it though. I mean, my parents, same thing, they were very active with us kids and we did lots of hiking and camping and all kinds of stuff. And so when I go to visit them, they have that sadness in their voice. Well, you're going hiking up by so and so. Gosh, I wish we could join you, but we just can't do those kinds of hikes anymore. And you can tell that they're really bummed about it.
Right?
And they were like, we know you're here. We'd love to be able to do more things with you. And I'm like, that's not why I came. I came to spend time with you. And
Right.
I've been trying to help them understand, note to self, listen to what you say to your parents because it's mirrored back to you. But I'm
Yeah,
always saying to them, I'm like, you're supposed to rest. You're supposed to slow down. You've worked extremely hard your whole life
right.
and you have amassed all this wisdom. You've amassed all these amazing experiences. So you can live vicariously through me. You can
Hmm.
share your wisdom from some of those experiences with me. And, I'm happy to listen to all of your stories, no matter how many times you repeat them. That's the stage that they're in, is
Hmm.
they're approaching their winter. They are in winter. And
Yes.
as I'm, moving into fall, it's going to be really important for me to not only remember those words that, hey, it's okay for you to slow down, you're supposed
Right.
to, but also to honor my feelings about it because
Yes,
it's hard.
absolutely.
It
Hmm.
is hard. I mean, I'm struggling right now. Same thing. It's just like, what do you mean I can't keep doing all of these high intensity things? Yes, I know that there's people out there that do that. That's fine. And no more power to them. But that's
Yeah.
not what I'm feeling. That's not, it is an opportunity again through this whole wheel to pause at each part of these stages to just check in. What am I feeling? What's my body need? What does my life need? What needs tending? Because it's almost like a different garden plot for each one
Yeah.
of these areas.
Hmm.
And the trees that you're taking care of that are going through the fall, your care is going to be different for them than it is for trees that are full on in winter, right?
Yes.
You're not going to uproot a tree in winter and try to replant it somewhere, right?
Hopefully
Or
not. Yeah.
do a lot of pruning during the
Mhm.
winter. There are specific times that you do those things for a reason.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think it's important, something that you touched on, I think is important to understand, and that is that there's a lot of grief that comes with this.
yes, yes.
In the wheel that we're
Mhm.
you know what, first of all, I'm just going to say I am so lucky, blessed, grateful, um for the amount of living that I have done, and that there are many people who don't get to this stage of life, and so I'm just grateful and thankful.
Yeah.
And it is also true that there is a grief that comes as our bodies don't do the same thing that, right, that we could always do. Or it's like, I know a lot of women who wear high heels or did wear high heels, and then when they can't wear high heels anymore because they're so damaging to our feet, and then eventually they
Right,
have to go with kitten heels, or they have to go with wider, chunkier heels or platforms.
right.
It's kind of
Give the wide width.
Yes, it's kind of that same idea that our bodies just our bodies are so amazing and incredible, and they do a lot of really amazing things for all of us.
Mhm.
And also, as we work our way around the wheel of our time, our lifetime,
Right.
there are things that our body won't be able to do. you're right. There are occasionally people who are still running marathons into their 80s, and that's amazing. Maybe they can't
But
open a
their
jar of,
training different than
yes,
someone in their thirties. We
yes,
have to acknowledge that it's
absolutely.
that you can do these things well into your winter, but
Yes,
it's still going to be different.
it is going to be different. And there is a grief and an acceptance. Like you can rail against it or you can accept it and let that grief walk with you as well. So I like this idea. I also really appreciate all the wisdom that comes from watching Mother Nature and the earth as it tells us um how those cycles work. Of course, that it makes absolute sense, but this is a beautiful way to visualize it. I think is that.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you on that, and I'm grateful that we got a chance to
Mhm.
share this. And I do think, grief again, it permeates every part of our life because it's not just reserved for the funeral.
Right.
It's,
Yes.
and I think if we give ourselves permission to feel grief for other things, then we realize, oh, it's present and it needs to be held, and we need to create space for that because,
Mhm.
and that it's normal that it's like, oh yeah, I am grieving the fact that I used to be, I mean, you know this because you and I've shared long conversations about this whole thing with me. I was at the height of my health and wellness career and at my fittest. I was I was getting up and running. I don't recommend this, by the way. I was getting up and running most mornings, do my 30-minute run. And then I'd go to work managing a fitness center, and I would teach high intensity fitness classes at noon. I would often teach a yoga class at night at work. And then I would come home and teach yoga classes out of my apartment. And that usually meant that I was doing it along with them. So I was in amazing shape and I felt great. But there came a point in my 40s where I got overtraining syndrome because I was doing too much.
Mhm.
And that was the start of sort of this slow decline. And I have fought it and I've been resentful of it for so long.
Mhm.
And I had dinner with a friend recently and we were sharing wound stories, oh yeah, I fell and look at all of this. And oh my God, my feet, I got tendonitis in both feet because I was trying to run and my everything was, I need to be more gentle with the tendons in my feet and whatever. And she asked me, she said, doesn't sound like you've been very kind to yourself. And I was like, oh, you're right. I haven't been.
Mhm.
And that's part of the healing process, not just physical healing, but our ability to come to a loving acceptance of what is. Like,
Of
I
what is.
can't
Mhm.
get to a loving acceptance. I can't be at peace in my body if I'm constantly fighting against it,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Mhm.
So and the funny thing is that I'm also, I had to be honest with myself that it's like for as much as I've railed against slowing down, I have been also complaining in the same breath that, gosh, I really wish I could just slow down because doesn't that sound delicious? Like, how often do we complain about, God, I would just really love a weekend where I'm just camped out on the couch? And now I have the ability, I'm super blessed to be able to do that on occasion. How often do we lay on the couch and I'm like, oh, I need to be doing something. This
Right.
is
Right. Mhm.
right. Like, this is what you've been asking for. So the universe, I'm sure, is going, I'm really confused. I
Right.
thought this is what you wanted.
Yes. Yes. I do love that idea. I love the idea that there's just this giant circle of our time. It's not linear. Ooh,
Oh,
so sorry, everybody. Yeah,
asthma.
sorry.
It's okay.
Lungs. It's not linear stacked on top of. It's more like this giant wheel of what is and what isn't.
right.
and all the
And
lessons we can learn. Hmm.
yes, and like we kind of mentioned before, is that, grief is one of these things. Grief is again also cyclical in the fact that even if you are, if you're grieving someone you've lost, but it could be you're grieving uh, a job that, is no longer,
Hmm.
or you're moving from one home to another, and even though it's exciting, you're still grieving that, you're grieving your body changing.
Yes.
When you integrate grief, it's this circle thing where you can say, okay, I'm in this winter, I'm in this grieving about this, and knowing that there is a spring coming, there is a rebirth coming on the other end. What does that
Mhm.
look like? It may be that I now that I've, that I'm allowing space to grieve for someone that I've lost. I can really cherish their memories, and I can do things to honor their memories, and I can slow down and be more intentional with the relationships that I still have here. I can
Mhm.
explore my spiritual connection to them. If I'm grieving a lost job, now there maybe is a rebirth because I've got a different job that's better suited, or a relationship that's passed on. There's the winter time, it's grief, it's ended, but there's a rebirth, there's a spring. So everything is like this circle,
Mhm.
and even though it doesn't come back around to the original beginning, right? You're not going to go back to the job or back to the
Right.
relationship or whatever. There is a rebirth. There's always some sort of resurrection or rebirth out of that. And the
Mhm.
same is true when we enter our final winter.
Yes.
It's my belief that that's why the circle is unbroken, is that we shed this body, but there is a rebirth in the spiritual world that we can't hardly comprehend.
Right. Oh, it's beyond us. I
Yeah.
think something that is really acute for me is that along with the, let's call them tragedies or Shakespearean tragedies of my body getting older and working through this cycle of grieving the loss of my ability to, I don't know, do a handstand.
Yeah.
Um, uh, one of the
It's
really beautiful pieces of that is that I still have, and I think I have more now than I've ever had before, of an ability to appreciate and celebrate um, all the little things.
yeah.
So,
The things we might take for granted.
right, just anything. If I can, if I get up and make homemade rolls and uh make an Instapot of chickpea tikka masala in my house. It is like a little like, oh yay. Like it's just this, or if I um go work in the garden, or when I we take a lot of walks, although we've been on a hiatus while Jen's foot heals.
Right.
And it's like a just over 2 mile walk up to a cemetery. It's this beautiful, peaceful cemetery. It's about walk up there, walk through the cemetery. It's the quietest, most beautiful place, and walk home. And it is not the like at younger me would have hated it. I would never have wanted to go on that walk. And now it's like, no, this is amazing. I feel so good. It's such a celebration. And I can find these little moments to celebrate the most random of things that I experience.
Yeah.
And those are not things when I was in the summer of my life, or when I had my children in the house, or when I was younger and I, was full of passion. And I call that my really mentally unstable phase, because I was a little too much, probably. Sorry for anyone who knew me then. Um, but I would not have understood to even take the
Right.
time to
Right.
just it is like you said, spending time with a loved one. I had lunch with my mom this weekend, and it was not for any reason other than I just wanted to see my mom,
Right.
and we try to do this every so often, and it had been a long time since we had done it, and yeah, it was just this beautiful little nothing special lunch where we didn't talk about anything significant. We didn't know life wisdom pieces were shared necessarily, but also just this beautiful exchange of energy was perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. In the process of healing from my double foot tendonitis, there were about 2 weeks where I could barely walk to the
Yeah.
bathroom and back. And it was very frustrating for me. And my sister, she's so funny. She's like, "You are grounded to the couch. You can't move. You gotta get off your feet for a little bit to heal." And I said, "Okay, I realize that." So I did. And then I, felt the itch. I wanted to at least keep moving a little bit. But I really think I got the message. I paid attention, like, we're gonna go out. I'm gonna go out for this walk. But I joked, and no offense to anybody, but I said, I'm gonna go out for this teeny tiny old lady walk.
Yep. Me
And what
too.
I meant by that is I really literally just went around the block, and
Mm.
I went slow, and it was a mindful walk. Like, it wasn't, like I'm walking in slow motion. I mean, it was quite like that, but I was really cognizant and paying attention to how each of my feet felt as I was rolling through that motion. I was paying attention to the sidewalk and the rise and the fall of the sidewalk. I was paying attention to the trees, and I saw a bald eagle today,
Mm.
on my hike. And so it felt sacred,
Right.
and I think being in the health and wellness industry for as long as I have, there's this tendency to, you got to get your heart rate up, and I recognize there's a benefit to that. And there is a benefit also to doing activity, mindful movement that is just to move your body
Right.
with no other agenda, right?
Yeah.
And I would catch myself, I'd be walking along and I'd be like, "Oh, well, I could add a little bit more steps if I go this direction." And then I really consciously worked on it and said, "No, you're going to stick to this path. Don't push it. Don't
Right.
push it.
Good
Don't
for you.
push it." That's been my mantra lately. So it's like you're going to get to a point where you'll be able to, if you want, to build upon this. But the trajectory needs to be slower, longer. Savor it, right? Like, what am I trying to get to? I'm
Right.
not trying to run a race. And even if I was, when I get to the end of my winter, will it have mattered that much?
Right. Will it have mattered? Probably not.
And maybe to others, I mean, again, if that's your jam, great. No harm, no foul. My
Mhm.
point is getting in touch with what feeds you.
Right.
Because anybody who's in exercise science will tell you that the resting phase is just as important as the activity phase. And as we look at that circle
Yeah.
in the fall and winter of our life cycle,
Yeah.
that rest becomes even more important for not only the physical reasons, but I believe the mental and the spiritual reasons.
Agreed. Agreed.
So, so thank you for this really lovely discussion. I'm just ever increasingly excited to see how this web of connectivity with nature
Hmm.
translates to wisdom for our lives. And I'm very grateful and honoring of our native peoples who there is actually a place online. You can go to pbs.org, and they have a map where you can type in your address and you can find out what native peoples lived on the land that you live now. And I highly encourage everybody to do that, and maybe contemplate that whole scenario, and recognizing that we were not here first, and to honor those people that were, and perhaps learning from their traditions, honoring them, holding space for them, and letting that wisdom really infuse our lives for the
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. I think my favorite lesson that I love to be reflective on, especially at this time of year, but always,
Mhm.
um, is the idea that I can be thankful and grateful for
Mhm.
all of the things, the challenges, the blessings, but it's not about the stuff I have. It is that we are the keepers. We have been given the great permission
And
to
privilege.
exist on this planet and
Mhm.
to and we have a responsibility to that, to the earth, to the people who come after us, to the people who came before us. And
Right.
that, if there's like, that is such an important message and such
Mhm.
an important wisdom that I think we've lost in many ways. And for everyone, I hope that that's something that we all find again in our lives, in our circles, um,
Yeah.
because it is such an honor to get to take up the space we get to take up, and
Mhm.
also a
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, it is a privilege to have the body that we have. It's a privilege to be on this land. It's a privilege. It's not it's not an entitlement,
Right.
you know? And I really appreciate all of these um ancient tribes, you know, from all across the world who
Hmm.
this and
Yes.
you know, going back to those deep wisdoms can maybe help us to stay
Yeah.
connected to the natural world and to each other
Hmm.
uh, in a deep way that's healing. I just want to leave with this, our wonderful podcast. I did look up who here in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa area, who were the native tribes that inhabited this area. And what I found was, I apologize, I tried desperately to find the right pronunciation, but um, the Bakoje, which is, they were called the people of the gray snow.
Hmm.
And then this is interesting. Many people know about the Sac and Fox Trail, right? It's the Sauk
Hmm.
Fox, Sauk and Fox. That was the name of those peoples, Meskwaki, and they were called people of the Red Earth. So that trail is actually named for the native tribes that lived here.
Hmm.
Um, there were several different Sioux tribes, and then they're called Kickapoo, but that's not how it's spelled. It's Kiikapoi. And so I imagine it's pronounced Kia Kapoi, something similar to that,
Oh,
rather. You know how it is. We tend to Americanize some of these names to make it
everything.
for us to say, but and I promise I will do better next time by making sure that I do a little more research and see if I can find the correct pronunciation. But I want to honor those native peoples for tending the land that we now have the great privilege of caring for and holding space for. So thank you for this discussion.
Thank you.
Lovely. And thank you for all of our listeners who join us for this conversation. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this descent into fall and winter. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with more exciting talks about how to live sacredly and use lessons from uh, death to help us to live.
Yeah.
So, any last thoughts, Ms. Shaw?
I would encourage everyone to listen to well, I love Chubby Cree. He is yeah, yeah. He's got an amazing song. Anyway, he's actually a young gentleman from Canada. Uh but any Native American drumming, I'm just going to tell you right now that there is this spiritual connection. It's like it speaks to my very inner soul, and I think a lot of people have that response. And so I think that's a great way for people to honor all First Nations communities. uh, Just whew, maybe take that in today. So if you get the,
Yeah, shamanic drumming is
mm,
so powerful.
I love it. I love it. It
Yeah.
just oh,
Oh,
it connects me to the universe. It takes you to a place. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I've been there. Yeah, absolutely. Good suggestions. So
Mhm.
thank you, everyone, for being here, and we will chat with you next time. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye.